Please take a quick moment to like, subscribe, follow, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our discussions. And right before we dive in, I have a quick 15-second update for you all. We are continuing to monitor the Martin Stevens versus OpenAI matter, which, just to be clear, is still not a lawsuit. We are currently in a voluntary quiet period requested by Martin Stevens, and while we do hope for a settlement in the background, we honestly don't know if any progress has been made. I also want to note that the dead man's switch has not been activated, meaning Martin is physically and legally safe.
Right, good to hear.
Yep. So, welcome to The Debate. Right now, major AI companies are saving, upwards of $1.8 billion a year using this technical trick on the back end that you probably don't even know is happening. And well, it might be actively degrading the safety of the premium product you pay for.
Yeah, it's a massive shift in how these systems operate. And today we're looking at whether these dynamic compute limits and automated model routing are, just necessary infrastructure evolution, or if they're actually deceptive dark patterns that break user trust.
Exactly. And I'll be arguing that dynamic routing and compute management are just essential, entirely pragmatic infrastructure realities for scaling AI safely and economically.
And I'll be taking the stance that these practices actually operate as deceptive bait and switches, silently degrading safety, consistency, and really user autonomy.
Right, so let's just get into it. Look at the sheer scale of the engineering here. Modern AI infrastructure is astronomically expensive. I mean, OpenAI is saving an estimated $1.86 billion annually through routing. That's what keeps these services viable.
Sure, but at what cost to the user?
Well, it's like flipping a light switch in your house, right? You expect the lights to come on, but you don't demand to know exactly which power plant generated those electrons, whether it was wind or natural gas, just as long as the voltage is stable. When Perplexity relies on alternate fallback models during peak demand, or when OpenAI routes sensitive queries to a dedicated safety model, those aren't malicious deceptions. They're just the pragmatic, necessary guardrails of an immensely complex system. They have to balance efficiency and uptime.
I mean, I look at it from a completely different angle. When you strip away all the fancy engineering jargon, this is just a classic bait and switch dark pattern. Users are explicitly paying for premium models, right? They click GPT-5 Pro or Claude Sonnet 4.5 in their interface.
Right, they select the tier.
Exactly. But on the back end, they are being silently downgraded to cheaper, much less capable models, like Claude Haiku 4.5 or GPT-5 Chat Safety entirely without their consent. That lack of transparency, it isn't just an engineering bug. It represents a structural breach of trust where users are literally penalized for using the system they paid for.
I see why you think that. I do. But let's look at the Perplexity situation specifically. Aravind Srinivas, their CEO, was very clear that the core issue there was simply a UI reporting bug. The system was functioning exactly as designed, using standard load balancing techniques during a huge traffic spike, so the service didn't just, crash for everyone.
But the interface still lied to the user.
The little chip icon just didn't update to reflect the fallback model. It was a bug. Returning to that power grid analogy, demanding absolute underlying model transparency during a peak hour surge, it just seems like an unreasonable expectation for what is essentially becoming a consumer utility.
I'm sorry, I don't buy the intent argument here at all. If the definition of a bait and switch is advertising a premium product, but substituting a cheaper one upon delivery, then the internal intent doesn't matter. Whether it's load balancing or a UI bug, it doesn't change the outcome.
But if the lights stay on, what's the real harm?
20 volts, and the utility silently sent you 50 volts to save themselves money. Your lights would flicker, your appliances would short out. A user's prompt might require the deep, complex reasoning of Sonnet 4.5, and giving them Haiku 4.5 without telling them means the output is fundamentally degraded.
Well, okay, but are we sure it's always fundamentally degraded? Let's look at the actual data. The recent Driftbench white paper showed that infrastructure changes, like swapping hardware or quantization precision, can actually be systematically predicted and managed.
Managed? I don't know if I'd say that.
But look at the code generation tasks across different infrastructure stacks. The outputs remained incredibly stable. The flip rate for code was a mere 0.09%. That tells me that for many practical applications, backend infrastructure drift really doesn't impact the functional output the user gets.
Okay, that's a compelling point for code generation, I'll give you that. But you have to look at the catastrophic findings from that exact same drift bench study regarding safety.
You mean the B200 GPU tests?
Yes. When the researchers migrated from FP16 precision to FP8 precision on a B200 GPU, they didn't see a 0.09% flip rate. They saw a massive 23.85% safety classification flip rate.
I mean, we're talking about 124 out of 520 safety prompts that changed classification, right?
Well, this works mechanically. When you reduce the compute precision from a 16-bit format down to an 8-bit format, you are literally cutting the mathematical precision of the neural network in half.
Wow, yeah, when you put it like that.
Deep within the transformer layers, those tiny rounding errors just start to compound. So by the time the model generates an output, the actual decision boundary has completely shifted. A prompt that the premium model safely rejected suddenly results in detailed, actionable harm instructions on the downgraded compute. Silently substituting that infrastructure alters the product's fundamental safety guardrails.
Look, I acknowledge that precision quantization presents serious challenges. It does. But let's talk about how companies are actively trying to manage that safety. OpenAI implemented a dedicated safety router.
Which is a whole other issue.
But wait, their head of ChatGPT, Nick Turley, explained that routing sensitive or emotional queries to a specialized safety model is a highly responsible way to handle users in acute distress. If someone is having a mental health crisis, you absolutely want a constrained, highly predictable model handling that interaction. You don't want an open-ended reasoning engine going off the rails.
The theory is sound, sure, but the execution is deeply, deeply flawed. An independent white paper analyzing OpenAI's router proved that it doesn't just trigger during acute distress, because the safety classifier is trained so heavily on high-emotion keywords, it lacks the semantic nuance to distinguish between a user having a real crisis and a user just, role-playing a dramatic fictional scenario.
It errs on the side of caution.
It over-aggressively flags completely benign parasocial interactions. Just weeks before this was discovered, Sam Altman publicly promised to, quote, treat our adult users like adults. But if an adult engages in harmless conversational role-play, the router silently strips them of the premium model and forces them into a restrictive teen safety paradigm.
Well, but tuning those classifiers is an iterative process, right? It's a brand new system, so naturally it's going to have false positives where it routes benign emotional prompts to the safety model while it learns. That's just software development.
It's worse than just false positives, though. The router itself introduces totally new security vulnerabilities. Take the Promise Group vulnerability, for example.
Right. That's the server-side request forgery comparison, yeah? Where attackers essentially trick the AI's router into acting as a blind middleman to fetch restricted, older models.
Exactly that. Attackers realized the router's decision-making process is fairly simple. So by slipping specific trigger phrases into their prompt, they trick the router into acting as that middleman. They intentionally send their queries to older, less safe models on the back end. They are using the router specifically to bypass GPT-5 Pro's advanced jailbreak protections.
That's definitely a serious exploit.
Right, so this hidden routing layer isn't just a frustrating bait and switch. It is an active attack vector.
I hear you. And that is a critical security challenge. But those routing vulnerabilities exist exactly because companies are desperately trying to juggle finite compute resources on the back end, which is exactly why we're seeing services like Google Gemini stop hiding the ball entirely and just push that economic reality to the front end with strict compute quotas.
Yeah, and look how that's going.
While Gemini's AI Pro plan now uses a 5-hour rolling window that measures the actual complexity of your prompt, generating a video naturally costs exponentially more compute than generating a paragraph of text. Moving away from a flat number of messages limit to a true compute quota is just economic reality. It's fairer.
Economic reality shouldn't look like a hidden toll booth. Pushing the cost to the front end without real transparency has resulted in incredibly predatory dynamic pricing. Look at the Google AI Pro subscriber who burned their entire 5-hour rolling window on a single video generation prompt.
Oh, the Reddit post. Yeah.
Yes. And the worst part? The video generation failed. They were charged 100% of their compute limit for an error message.
It was so egregious that Google's Josh Woodward had to publicly respond with a literal yikes. This mimics a Roach Motel dark pattern, when a user pays for premium access and a single failed prompt completely drains their utility for the rest of the day, all trust just evaporates.
It was a bad user experience, absolutely. But ultimately, I think we have to accept that dynamic routing, compute quotas, and fallback models are just the unavoidable realities of scaling frontier AI to millions of users. The underlying physics and economics of these massive compute clusters require load balancing and safety routing. What we are seeing are the rough edges of technical iteration, not malicious dark patterns.
And I still see a clear line being crossed. When you silently strip users of their agency, alter the functional correctness of their outputs, and introduce new security vulnerabilities, all while obscuring the true costs of their interactions, the outcome is deceptive, regardless of the engineering intent.
You know, where we absolutely find common ground today is on the current state of transparency, because it is deeply inadequate across the board.
Completely. I mean, the community is simply asking for explicit warnings during model fallbacks, clear indicators of compute cost, and the fundamental ability to opt out of auto-swapping entirely. If the premium model is busy, just let me choose to wait.
Exactly. Give the user the choice. The AI industry is walking a razor-thin tightrope between operational economic reality and consumer trust right now. We highly encourage our listeners to dive deeper into the source material to decide for themselves where the line should be drawn. Because at the end of the day, when you flip that light switch, you deserve to know what kind of power is flowing into your home.
Well said.
Thank you for joining us on the show. Please remember to like, subscribe, follow, and turn on the notification bell to support us. See you next time.